Doomers say AI is a thing, it's imminent, it's inevitable, and it's going to kill us all. And the boosters say AI is a thing, it's imminent, it's inevitable, and it's going to solve all of our problems. So I think the very first step is to recognize the inevitability narrative for what it is, which is a bid to steal agency, right? Because the future is not yet written.
Welcome back to In the Meanwhile. I'm Marcus Harrison Green.
And I'm Nora Kenworthy. And welcome back, dear listeners, to another week of our support group for the perennially pissed off and dismayed. Marcus, I don't even know where to start with this week.
How could you, Nora? It's been a multi-course meal of horrors. It truly is. But I guess to start us off, maybe an appetizer of administrative misbehavior.
A little amuse-bouche of misconduct, if you will.
I love the alliteration in this episode. My God.
Yeah, are we talking about Labor Secretary Lori Chavez de Rumer, who resigned after facing multiple scandals? I think for those who are counting, that is the third woman of Trump's cabinet who has been fired or resigned in 2 months.
My God. Are there any women that are left in the cabinet, Nora? I mean, there are definitely folks who need to resign, shall we say. And I'm not saying these folks didn't, but God.
All part of that wonderful anti-DEI agenda, Marcus. Soon we're just going to be spelling cabinet with a K. This week we also had news, though, of another cabinet member's misdeeds. Kash Patel saw Lori's scandal and said, "Hold my beer," or beers, many beers, literally.
Yes, so those who don't know, The Atlantic reported this week that Patel has repeatedly been so drunk on the job that breaching equipment, quote unquote, had to be acquired to reach him behind locked doors. He's keeping it classy. Oh, yes, keeping it classy. Good old Cash, I tell you.
I mean, you
My
know
God.
you're having a fun time when breaching equipment has to be brought in
I,
to rouse you.
yeah, that reminded me of, my freshman year in college, but I don't know.
Exactly.
Maybe the FBI director shouldn't be doing such things.
Yeah. And who but the entire US men's hockey team could have seen this coming? What cracks me up about this is, like, as you said, it's like the kid at college who's desperately trying to, like, drink to fit in and just cannot handle their liquor. And I just want to be like, Cash, it's not making you cool. Like, no amount of drinking
No,
is going to make
no, not
anyone
at all.
think you're cool.
Not whatsoever, but the Atlantic article also repeatedly described Cash Patel's, and this is their actual words, freakouts on the job. Not freak offs for the folks who
No.
are following the Diddy case, but freakouts. I mean, still bad. But anyway, these freakouts include when he couldn't log into his computer and thought he was fired, which, of course, is exactly the kind of grace under fire that we want from FBI leadership.
Yes.
And I will just say, I mean, in fairness, I wouldn't have put it past this administration to fire him without letting him know. And
I mean,
so,
Marcus, who among us has not been able to log into their computer and assume that Trump had fired them?
Fair point, my friend, fair point.
I mean, in Cash's defense, overreaction is sort of baked into the whole criminal justice system, I guess.
Very
When
true.
he was asked about the allegations, Cash, of course, laid them to rest by demonstrating his calm and cool manner, by which I mean he screamed at reporters and launched a $250 million suit.
Yeah, that is called non-adult behavior, I believe, Nora. But here we are. That said, speaking of overreactions, Trump continues to engage in diplomacy via all caps social media posts. As of this recording, Trump insists we're in a truce with Iran, and Iran is seizing boats in the strait like a bully at an Easter egg hunt.
Yes. This entire thing is starting to have, like, messy public breakup vibes. I mean, I truly feel like they're fighting about who broke up with whom or whether or not they're back together. I am I'm losing track of the TMZ
I
updates.
I I I think I think Trump is himself on the day, by the way, that at least as of this recording, that there was several stories about how TMZ is actually going to start covering
Oh,
politics.
yes.
So
Yes, looking forward to those
here we
updates.
are. Here we are. Yeah, that is. I know it should idiocracy should just be satire, but no, it's a documentary. Nora, it's a documentary, and we. So anyway, that said, diplomatically speaking, my good friend, have we tried passing Iran a note in class that says, "Do you like me? Check yes or no."
Well, I wonder if with Trump it's more like check yes or yes. um, I mean, in reality, I think most of our diplomatic energy seems to be going into AI generated videos and images. And even at that, Iran is definitely beating us at our own game.
Yeah, like every time they release another one of those Lego videos, I'm surprised by how catchy they are. Like,
Same.
they have me just bopping along to this AI generated rap tracks and I hope that that is not considered treason because if it is, I'm a bit worried. I gotta admit, my stepson showed it to me and I was like, I shouldn't enjoy this as much as I do.
I
But
know. I
yeah.
know. It's they're not wrong. Uh, the only thing that seems certain in this war is that Trump's family is making bucket loads of money. That seems to be the only consistent news report we're getting. Meanwhile, I'm going to have killer quads by this summer because I'm biking everywhere to avoid buying gas, which I guess is a silver lining.
That is true, and the fact that, Seattle is a bike-friendly town, I'm
Yes.
assuming you're finding various pathways that are okay to get to and fro, Nora.
And also a bike friendly mayor who I will shout out, given we gave her a bit of a
Yes.
hard time last week. So
Well, I mean, I don't know if it was us, I'll just say that.
fair.
But anyway, we love all of our guests, folks. That said, Nora, beyond Trump, I guess it's AI companies, defense contractors, and prediction market platforms, which are all making money hand over fist these days.
Yes. So basically, all the fascist dude bros like this war. Got it. Great. Uh,
In fairness, Nora, that's not different from any other war, but yes,
I know.
very pronounced in this one, though. It's very pronounced.
But speaking of fascist dude bros, Palantir's CEO Alex Karp has been especially unhinged this week, releasing a 22-point memo on X that one person accurately described as the ramblings of a supervillain.
Yeah, isn't that how he always sounds, though? This is just like the bullet pointed version for Trump, right? I mean, I guess
Probably.
I don't. Among the bullet points, though, in his memo, we had a call for a national draft. I'm sure his loved ones would be the first to sign up for that. Anyway, there's claims of Western superiority, which that checks off with the guy, and he also critiques the post-war defanging of Germany. Yeah, I got to say earlier when you were like the Trump administration, we can reduce it down to 1K. I think there are two additional Ks we can put into that 1K, and
Yeah,
that would fit well with the administration and his allies, shall we say? Anyway,
yeah, yeah. I mean, also, like, does he remember the Marshall Plan?
I
um,
obviously not. These folks I'm learning a lot about, tech bros. Many of them are what they, quote unquote, self-reported autodidacts. And what
yeah,
I'm learning is when don't go through the pathways of liberal arts education, there are a lot of omissions from your
you
from,
miss.
from your own from your self-propelled education, shall we say. But anyway.
Either that or they're getting their history hallucinated by chatbot. I I mean,
Yeah, fair
if
enough. Fair
if
enough.
folks are noticing a theme in today's discussion, it's possibly that generative AI is everywhere and being not only used but controlled by some deeply powerful and disturbingly unaccountable individuals.
Yeah, we are all caught up in I don't know, this relentless hype fest for AI. If this feels disorienting, folks, if you feel like the only sane person in the room full of chatbots, well, you know what? We are here to tell you you are not alone. You are very much in good company.
And you're not wrong either. And here to help us understand where all this hype and horror has come from and where it is leading us, we have none other than Professor Emily Bender with us today. I couldn't be more thrilled to welcome Emily to the podcast. She is like this brilliant oracle scholar that we all need to lead us through this age, and I feel really lucky to call her a colleague.
Yes, and our astute listeners will notice that I unfortunately could not be on this interview. That's probably why it sounds so great. But I had caught a case of the spring flu, so Nora was able to nerd out all alone on this interview. I was super jealous.
Marcus, there was no one to bring us back to reality. So apologies in advance to our listeners.
It is truly a great episode. No apologies necessary, folks. That said, back to Professor Bender and all the great, wonderful stuff she does. She is a linguist and endowed professor at the University of Washington, where she directs its computational linguistics laboratory. Emily is a leading voice in the field and a prominent critic of large language models, emphasizing the importance of ethical considerations and data transparency in AI development. She is also the author of many highly influential papers, as well as co author of the recent book, The AI Con: How to Fight Big Tech's Hype and Create the Future We Want. She was named to the first ever Time AI 100 list and is co host of the fantastic podcast Mystery AI Hype Theater 3000, which you need to absolutely listen to.
Emily, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you.
I'm really excited for this chance to talk with you and to your audience.
It feels like such an honor to have you. So, let's start at a place that I know is important to you as a linguist. What do most people mean when they talk about AI? And how is the widespread use of that term problematic?
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting angle on it. I usually like to open conversations by saying that the phrase artificial intelligence doesn't refer to a coherent set of technologies. And
Hmm.
it is, in fact, a marketing term that, sprinkles some sparkly fairy dust on, it could just be a spreadsheet, it could be a chatbot to make it seem like more than it is. But the way you ask the question, what do people mean when they say that? Um, I think sometimes people are just talking about chatbots. But I think other times they are talking about this imaginary of actually intelligent machines, which is what that term invites us to imagine. And so
Hmm.
whenever I'm in conversation with someone and they start talking about AI, I always try to pin them down. What are you referring to here specifically this time?
Yes, like what imagined bot do you have in your head? Um, I notice that you often put AI inside scare quotes, and maybe there should actually be an extra set of scare quotes around intelligence in that phrase.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, intelligence is a hugely problematic notion that basically goes back to eugenics and race science. And
Mm.
every time the AI folks try to pin down a definition, so I'm thinking about the Sparks of AGI paper that came out of Microsoft, or there's more recent again, paper is generous for both of these. They didn't go through peer review, and the more recent one doesn't even really hold the form of a paper, but there was a more recent attempt to define artificial general intelligence. And it's like you scratch the surface, and they are citing race scientists. Like it's there's
Mhm.
no there beyond that because the idea of intelligence is this idea that you can rank the entire human population on one property and that property sort of determines their worth, and then so you've got people lined up in the scale, and that very quickly turns over into, well, these groups of people are better than these other groups. And you'll often hear in the discourse, people talking about AI as now as smart as a toddler, or sometimes it's like as a PhD. And so there's this idea that there's a ranking of people, and if they're not going to use IQ, they're going to use some other ranking, and then they're going to try to like slot the machines in there. So yes,
Hmm.
intelligence is problematic. Artificial intelligence earns the scare quotes because it's just a marketing term drawing on this other problematic notion instead of, naming the specific technology. And I've had some fun coming up with alternative names.
Would you like to
Uh,
share some?
yeah. So, there's stochastic parrots, which is, a little bit older at this point. We can talk about that more if you like. But I found that to talk about large language models being used to output text, synthetic text extruding machine
Mhm.
is really nice because that, basically says, it's synthetic, it's not real, and extrude is a little bit gross. And so the ick factor is right there. But also, like, for chatbots, if you want to have a de-anthropomorphized way of talking about them, I think Conversation Simulator captures it.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's not chatting with you, but you can use it to simulate a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, so on that point, I wanna pick up on one of my favorite papers that you've written that lays
Mm,
out an explanation of how large language models and natural language processing, which are basically, I mean, excuse me for being kind of overly distilling this point, but the technological building blocks of tools like ChatGPT. This paper argues that they cannot understand language, and it does so by presenting this hypothetical story of a intelligent octopus. Do you mind
yeah.
summarizing that story? Because I think it's such a great metaphor for what ChatGPT actually does.
Happy to. So this is from a paper that I wrote with Alexandra Kohler. It came out in 2020 at the Association for Computational Linguistics. And the paper is basically trying to make very vivid the fact that languages are systems of signs. So the
Mm,
form is not the meaning. And that language models, which really are a key ingredient in something like ChatGPT, only have access to form. And so
mhm,
even though they output seemingly coherent and syntactically well formed text, the fact that it seems meaningful is all on our side. So we're trying to make that vivid. And the octopus thought experiment is one version of that. It was actually initially a dolphin. And we switched to an octopus partially because we really wanted the environments of the characters to be very distinct and we can
mhm,
interact too easily with
mhm.
dolphins.
Yes.
But also, Alexander points out that octopuses are just inherently funnier than dolphins. So the scenario is this: we have two speakers of English that are stranded on two desert islands that happen to be connected by a telegraph cable, and there's telegraph equipment there for them. And fortunately, these two English speakers know Morse code. So they start communicating with each other over the telegraph. And then we have this other character, the hyper intelligent deep sea octopus. And I'm a little bit sorry to have characterized it as hyper intelligent because that entails the scale that doesn't make sense. But the point of doing that is to say we actually don't care what this creature is actually able to do.
Mhm,
It doesn't matter. It could be able to do anything, but it only has access to the form of their language and it's not going
mhm.
to get to the meaning. So the octopus wraps its tentacle around the cord and it can feel the dots and dashes and it's able to calculate over time the patterns of those dots and dashes to predict them fairly well. And so at some point it decides to cut the cable and start impersonating one of the English speakers back to the other. And so that English speaker will say something like, "Oh, what a beautiful sunset tonight." And that prompts the octopus to look at the patterns that have happened so far. And the octopus sends back the dots and dashes for, "Yes, it reminds me of lava lamps," which we picked because no octopus on the planet could know what
I've
a
seen a
lava
lot of
lamp is, right?
it.
um, and then the second scenario was the English speaker sends the dots and dashes for, "Hey, I've created a way to make a coconut catapult. Let me show you how." And the octopus, consulting his database of possible patterns, comes back with, "Oh, great idea. Well done." But of course, catapult, coconut, none of these things are meaningful to the octopus. And then finally, the English speaker on the island says, "Help, I'm being chased by a bear. All I have is this stick. What should I do?" And our joke in the paper is that it's at this point, if the speaker still hadn't sort of cottoned on to the fact that that wasn't their friend on the other island, if they survived the bear attack, they would figure it out because the octopus would have nothing helpful to say.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the story. People sometimes misinterpret that as us saying that the reason ChatGPT doesn't understand is that it doesn't have physical grounding in the world.
Hmm.
Um, but actually, what's missing is the way that people use language socially and the way we connect with each other's minds as we're learning language and then as we're using it.
Yeah, do you wanna say a bit more about that? About how we kind of co-construct meaning through conversation?
Yeah, I mean, this is some of the most fun and most exciting parts of linguistics. So, if people want to look further, I recommend looking into pragmatics, which is the study of how we use language; sociolinguistics, which is how we use the variation in language to construct our social world; and also psycholinguistics, which is how we process language. And there's a great book there by Herb Clark called "Using Language,"
Mhm.
where he talks about conversation as a joint activity. And there's also a wonderful, bizarre paper by Michael Reddy called On the Conduit Metaphor. And I still don't know who the intended audience of this paper was, but it very between that and Herb Clark's book, it's very clear that when we're understanding language, we are not unpacking the meaning that the speaker packed into those words, but instead we are keeping in mind everything we know or believe about the speaker's knowledge and beliefs, about our common ground, and what they know or believe about their intended audience. And then against that background, we use the words as a really rich clue to the intended communicative act.
Mhm.
So, in other words, in order to make sense of any language, we have to imagine a mind behind the text.
Mm.
And that's why ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and all those are so dangerous because out comes language. We apply our language understanding capability, which means imagining a mind that isn't there.
So we're almost trapped into imagining a mind. It would be difficult for us to not do that with
Yeah,
the way that they communicate.
exactly. And then the design choices of the companies lean into this further, right? So it's absolutely a design choice to have the chatbots use I, me pronouns.
Mhm.
There's no I inside of there, but it reinforces this notion of a mind.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we have most of us have completely drunk the Kool-Aid on thinking about AI not only as sentient, but often all-powerful. I'm wondering, as a linguist, if you think about the sorts of harm it causes for us to constantly talk about AI as if it were this hyper intelligent, sentient being.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a paper with Nana Inni and Peter Zuckerman looking at the anthropomorphizing language that's used in descriptions. And the particular corpus we were looking at was abstracts and like introductions of papers at CHI, which is the Human Computer Interaction Conference, also company blog posts and some newspaper articles. And we categorize the various different ways that people speak about these systems as if they were human like. And we kick ourselves every day for having chosen to use the word anthropomorphization, which is both hard to say and hard to spell
Mhm.
because it's so long. Um, but part of the harms there is that it uh, reinforces this idea that that thing that we are doing simulated conversations with um, could be accountable for something, is being thoughtful, is processing all of this information and coming up with the best possible answer because it can see everything and we can't. Um, and you know, uh, on the flip side, I think making it harder to do the kind of critical inquiry that we should be doing about
Mhm.
what's being automated here, why are we automating it, what was the source data for this thing, and how does that reflect what we do or do not want to have happen in the world. Abebe Berhane points out that not just large language models, but machine learning in general is inherently conservative in the sense that it's designed to take the patterns from the past to create the future.
Yep.
Um, so I
Yeah.
think that if we step away from anthropomorphizing language and speak in terms instead of automation, the conversation gets much clearer.
I want to push on a little point that you made so that I can make sure we're understanding you correctly. Do you envision a way in which ChatGPT could be trained or built so as to begin to understand that deeper meaning in language? Like if someone continues to engage with it and ChatGPT quote unquote learns more about that individual user, is there a point at which it begins to mimic some of that kind of conversational relation?
Um, no, I think that we produce the conversational relation. Like people certainly can form attachments to chatbots. That's happening over and over again. We also form attachments to cars and pens and whatever. We are attachment happy. We're ready to do it, but these systems can never really actually hold up the other end of the bargain. In the Bender and Kohler 2020 paper that we started with, the octopus paper, we give a very specific definition of understanding, which is mapping from language to something outside of language. And that something can be in the social world, it doesn't have to be in the physical world. So if you have um, an automated system that you can speak to and have it turn on your lights, then for that very thin definition of understanding, it's understood, right? If you say the thing and it does the thing, um, and those older systems had specific what were called intents that they could handle. And so the idea was there was a wide range of expressions that the user might use to get to set an alarm, turn on the lights, whatever the range of actions were. And the job of the language engineers at Google and elsewhere, I think Apple does this too with Siri, was to figure out how to do that mapping and then program that mapping. And that is a very thing and sort of machine appropriate kind of understanding. But when you see people who are using chatbots for companionship or even more frighteningly, mental health therapy, the illusion of understanding is never going to be substantiated.
So, Emily, your book with Alex Hanna, The AI Con, which came out last year and which is fantastic, by the way, argues that we have been conned by two competing narratives about AI: doomerism and boosterism. How do both of these AI takes get it profoundly wrong? And what should we actually be worried about when it comes to AI?
It's very frustrating to me to watch how the media buys into this narrative that there's two ends to the spectrum. You can be a doomer who thinks that AI is going to kill us all, or you can be a booster. And so those folks say it's going to solve all of our problems. And the narrative that they give you is that that's the ends of the range of possible opinions, and everyone else had to sort of like line up somewhere in the middle. And the media will do this too, when in fact they are two sides of the same coin. So the doomers say AI is a thing, it's imminent, it's inevitable, and it's going to kill us all. And the boosters say AI is a thing, it's imminent, it's inevitable, and it's going to solve all of our problems. And so it really is the same argument based on this idea that the large language models in particular are somehow going to combust into consciousness and be able to do science for us. And one of the solve all of our problems things that often comes up is it's going to solve the climate crisis. Well, we don't need more science there. We need political will, right?
We certainly don't need a lot of science that's like burning up our natural resources as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, it's interesting to see people like Sam Altman sort of voicing both of those sides at once or
Yeah.
alternately. Like, what do you make of that?
Um, I think that the doomerist narrative is very beneficial to the people who are selling this technology because it says our tech is incredibly powerful and it is too powerful to regulate. It is too powerful to ignore, right? And if you believed that there was a magic everything machine, and you were running an investment fund or you were running a business, you would be crazy not to sort of put all of, at least a large investment into um, building and using that everything machine. And if something could be so powerful that it could kill us all, then that's a really good piece of evidence. It's not evidence, but in this narrative, that it's a very powerful machine.
Yeah, and by extension, it seems like they're making the argument of we, as the holders of this all-powerful machine, are the only people who can save you from said machine, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's all
Um,
this, like, palace intrigue between Sam Altman and the Amadeus and the whole, Anthropic breaking off of OpenAI and so on, which
yes.
is, like, arguments over who should be in charge of the possible doomsday machine.
Right, right. I'm thinking of the recent New Yorker, profile that just came out on Sam Altman, which
Mm,
I think completely misses the point of I mean, okay, fine, we can ask whether he's trustworthy, but the larger question we should be asking is, like, should we put this amount of power in the hands of anyone, regardless of
right.
whether they're trustworthy or not?
Yeah, and this amount of resources behind this particular
Yeah,
idea, that also, motivates massive data collection, right? So theft of creative work, but also lots of surveillance and all of this stuff, which we're just supposed to accept because this is the inevitable future, because that's this, path that we're imagining ourselves to be running down.
right, right, sprinting. Um, well, let's back up a little bit. You already mentioned stochastic parrots, and one of the reasons we wanted to chat with you is because I think we've just passed the 5-year anniversary of
Yeah.
this very contentious paper that you wrote with Timnit Gebru and Margaret Mitchell of Google, along with several others. That is commonly known as the stochastic parrots paper. Can you walk us through what the argument was there and why it was apparently so controversial?
Yeah, so, I mean, the funny thing about it is that it's a survey paper. So the fact that it's controversial says a lot about, I think, how, insecure Google felt
Mhm.
about what they were doing. So the paper was written actually, ridiculously quickly in September, October of 2020, um, when it started because, Dr. Guru to meet DM'd me on Twitter saying, um people around me are, like, pushing to make the language models bigger and bigger because at this point, OpenAI has GPT-3 and Google's got
Awesome.
language models, but they don't have the biggest one. Um, you know, and I keep wondering, is there a paper somewhere that sort of just, like, lists out all the risks of going for
Huh.
bigger and bigger? And if not, If you wrote something like that, I would be, customer number one," she said. And so I said, "I don't know of any papers like that, but, here's the 6 or so things that I think would be in it." And the next day I said, "Hey, this feels like a paper outline. You wanna write this paper?" Um, and she said, we're all busy, but also it was 2020, so we're all stuck at home. And she got Meg Mitchell, Dr. Margaret Mitchell, and a few other colleagues at Google on board. And I got now Dr. Angelina McMillan Major, who was my PhD student at the time, on board on the UW side, and we just sort of poured in everything that we all collectively knew about these different harms. And the phrase stochastic parrots comes from something that felt kind of speculative in October of 2020, which was the idea that people would get really excited about synthetic text. And we said, if
Mm.
you've got text out there that looks fluent, but has no one who's accountable for it, that could lead to various dangers. And we honestly thought we were kind of on thin ice at that point because at least I couldn't imagine why people would be so excited about synthetic text.
Mm.
Um, so that was one thing we got really wrong. And the paper went through Google's internal publication approval, pub approve process, sort of at the last minute, got submitted to the conference, getting peer reviewed. And while that happened, somebody at Google, and I'm not at Google, so this part of it is, all secondhand and not really my story to tell. So I can't do details, but someone got upset about it and told Tim Neat, as she and I were the co-lead authors on the paper, that she should either retract the paper from the conference or remove all Googler author names from it. And Angie and I said, okay, we feel really strange publishing a paper that's 7 people's work with just our names on it,
Yeah.
but we're not the primarily impacted people here. So let's do what the Google authors want us to do. And initially the word was just go ahead and publish it. We want this out in the world. And then Tim Neat said, hold on, this isn't right. Because she was a research scientist. It was literally
Yeah.
her job to do this kind of work and publish papers, and she said, "I'm gonna need to know who made this decision and how this is gonna work in the future, or I'll work with my manager to find a suitable end date." Well, the reply that she got back is, "We accept your resignation," but she hadn't resigned. So then, uh Dr. Mitchell is sort of working on documenting the various ways that Dr. Gabru had been mistreated at Google, and Google gets upset about that, and she does
Mhm.
flat out get fired a few
Mhm.
months later. So the paper becomes this massive news story. Um, and I think it's pretty funny that, if Google's goal here was to either quash this paper or make sure that it wasn't associated with Google, they fired the wrong person. Like whoever made that decision. So, what's the argument? So stochastic parrots as a phrase is yet another attempt to make vivid what's going on with these machines. And, no shade on actual parrots, who I'm sure have some kind of internal life, but pulling on the English verb to parrot, which is to repeat
Mhm.
back without understanding. And then stochastic means randomly according to a probability distribution.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I think it's also worth noting, my understanding is that both Tim Neat and Margaret were on Google's quote unquote ethical AI team, right?
Yes,
So
they were the co-leads of that team. So,
these are the
yeah.
people who we might expect to be putting out papers of exactly this nature.
Yeah.
um, looking back at it now, that paper was really prophetic. Can you walk us through some of the harms that it named and warned about, and which of those seem most important to you now?
Yeah. So I already mentioned the sort of possible harms of synthetic text, which I think have become huge and felt a little bit less certain at the time. We talk about the environmental impact. And this was, it was already known. There's the work of Emma Strubel and others who were, busy documenting that this sort of larger and larger scale actually meant more and more compute, which has, carbon impacts. We
Mhm.
also know there's water impacts and all of that. Um, Another thing that was very important to all of us is that if you just grab data more or less indiscriminately, you don't know what's in it. And many of the people on this paper have been working on data set and model documentation, which is
Mm.
going to use machine learning and we're going to use it in a way that where we can mitigate the harms. We have to know how the underlying data and the test data relate to our use cases. And that's not happening here. Um, the other thing is that this drive to just more and more data means you've gotta grab whatever you can get your hands on, and whatever you can get your hands on is what's on the internet. My co-author Alex Hanna likes to say they grabbed everything that wasn't nailed down on the internet.
And some that was.
It was, yeah, for sure. Just ripped it, right? So, um, and, you might think that, a data set that big coming from the internet that ostensibly everybody, in quotes, "has access to," must inherently be diverse and sort of inherently represent a wide range of worldviews. But in fact, that's not what's happening at all. There
Mhm.
are decisions being made at every point along the way. So who has access to the internet? Not everybody. Who can comfortably contribute in
Yeah.
various forums and who's getting harassed out, right? Again,
Yeah.
there's a difference there. But there's also sort of more subtle points. Well, I mean, they're all apparently too subtle for the people who make this argument. But Willie Agnew's pointed out that this filtering step that happens, right?
Mhm.
You would like your chatbot to not output hate speech. That's a laudable impulse. And so you're going to try to filter websites that are filled with hate speech. And the way that people were doing that, at least in 2020, was using this particular list, for English anyway, of obscene and something otherwise very bad words that some developer had put up on GitHub
Oh my god.
because they were creating an interface for, I think, image search. And these are words that they just did not want showing up as autocompletes in the image search. And it's like, slurs, among other things, but then also, terms to do with sexuality and some that are just identity terms. And so if
Mhm.
you're using this list to filter websites, you're going to lose all the spaces in which, for example, LGBTQ people present themselves just in their own identities,
Yeah.
further skewing what's represented in the data set.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, so part of my research takes place in Southern Africa in
Mhm.
Lesotho, which is a country where, about 2 million people speak Sesotho, tiny country. And so one of the things I was looking into is like how much of the data that was fed into AI models actually came from sub-Saharan Africa or more specifically places like Lesotho. And it's like this tiny fraction of the
Yeah.
data. It's shocking how much it underrepresents the vast majority of the world.
Right. And there's a tension there because on the one hand you might say, well, we should just collect more data. We should make sure that Lesotho is better represented. Um, but maybe not also,
Yeah.
right? Like the more people are exposed, the more potential there is for surveillance.
Mhm.
And like it's bad that these models that everyone's are using represent this very American worldview. There's this really striking series of images that I saw because the same thing happens in the text to image models, where
Mhm.
someone had prompted one of these systems to produce images of groups of people of different designations. And
Mhm.
they were all grinning at the camera the way American tourists do.
Yeah.
Even though that's
Mm.
not, like, what people do in different societies, right?
Yeah.
So, it's bad that we have these tools that are so powerful that are representing a very American worldview, but we don't need the Lesotho version of them too, right?
Yeah.
We need to sort of take power away from these American ones, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Or power away from tools that are constantly shoving us all into the same stylistic box,
Yeah,
whether it's with image or text or whatever, right?
yeah,
Let's talk a little bit about AI and teaching and research. You and I are both professors at the University of Washington. You've been an outspoken advocate, thank you, of resisting its use in teaching and research. At the same time, we've had the university accept millions of dollars to expand AI. They've hired a new vice provost of AI. They even created a custom AI tool for the institution, TBD, what it's actually supposed to be used for. What strategies do you use, and would you like to see others using to kind of resist this type of AI inevitability creep in our institutions?
yeah. So I think the very first step is to recognize the inevitability narrative for what it is, which is a bid to steal agency. Right,
Mm,
because the future is not yet written. Um, and then sort of with that, we can double down on what our values are in terms of teaching. What is it that we want students to be able to do? And, if you are teaching a class on building systems called artificial intelligence, then sure, like teach
mhm,
students about that. If you're teaching a class on writing or history. And our history department has done a really good job coming up with a statement about so-called artificial intelligence. Um, then these tools that present students with a shortcut to producing the form of what you're looking for in class just interrupt learning. At the same time, I don't want to be put in an adversarial position with my students.
Mhm.
And so, the stance that I take is not that I am banning anything, but I sort of bring students into a conversation about why are we doing what we're doing. And in my case, from the position where I teach computational linguistics, I'm like, yeah, in my program, in what we're doing here, you're going to learn why these tools don't do what people say they
Mhm.
do. I
Yeah.
had a really interesting conversation with a um, professor who worked on environmental issues at Harvey Mudd College, and she's like, "Yeah, in my class, we talk about the environmental impact, and, like, students wouldn't dare by the time we're done with that conversation." So, there's always, like each discipline, I think, will have some take on a critical look at these tools, and the
Mhm.
idea is to bring students into that and to say, "I am here to teach you, and in order for that to happen, I have to see your own authentic work so I can give you my own authentic feedback on that.
Mhm.
And if you shortcut around that, then you as a student are not gonna get the benefit of what you're here to do."
Yeah. I've seen those strategies work in my own classroom of just really engaging in thoughtful conversation with students about why we use them, these tools, and why we don't, and in my case, how they impact our health.
Mhm.
But we seem to be failing to have those kinds of thoughtful conversations with our institutions. For example, I was just at a Schools of Public Health conference in
Mm.
DC where they had put up these big banners that said ethical AI is public health. And one of the, keynote speakers told people that if they weren't building their own AI models for educating the public about public health, that it was equivalent to not knowing how to use Google. It was like this like very extreme sort of wholesale adoption. Um, and I wonder like what it is about our institutions that has made them so resistant to the idea of resisting AI.
Yeah. That is a really good question, and here I'm just gonna speculate as another, faculty member like you, like, this isn't my area of research, right? But I suspect it is a combination of, um, hollowing out of institutions, right? That, if you look at the University of Washington, which is nominally a state institution, and the tiny little support that we get from the state, and the fact that there is so much money and power associated with this right now. And the leadership of institutions are people who have gravitated towards and started wielding power, and power recognizes power.
Mhm.
Um, and it's really unfortunate. And it's true. I mean, so as you mentioned, we have this purple thing at UW, which is our own local chatbot, but it's not like we've trained the thing from scratch. So it's, I think, a skin on uh, OpenAI's thing. I think I'm
Okay.
actually not entirely sure. Um, they're
Which also,
supposed
like, we should know where it comes from, right? If we're
Yeah,
using
exactly, exactly. Um, and so, we have all that, and one of the messages that I try to keep bringing anytime I get a chance to talk to the administration or to other people who are going to is that refusal should always be an option. That there's
Mhm.
no ethical use of something if you don't have throughout the possibility of saying, "No, we actually can't use this."
Yeah, and still
Yeah.
participating fully in that community, right?
Yeah.
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 Um, I know this is also not your area of expertise, but it's something I've been paying a lot of attention to recently, which is communities coming together to resist AI data centers, which
Mhm.
seems like a really promising sort of space of resistance. I know we
Yeah.
have, I think, 5 new data centers being proposed in Seattle. Um, do you see this as part of broader resistance against AI, or is this kind of some sort of like tech NIMBYism that is just popping up in different communities?
Yeah, no, I think it is very much broader resistance against, this narrative of AI and all the things that go with it, right?
Mhm.
The promised job displacements, some of which are happening, right? So
Mhm.
illustrators, for example,
Yeah,
and, translators are finding work drying up because people are deciding that these systems that are built on stolen data provide good enough answers for the things
yeah.
that they would previously have paid someone for. Um, and the nice thing about data centers as this focal point is that it's a specific physical place that you can go or a specific policy thing that you can look to because the data centers have to get approved by various political bodies. And so there's these focal points that people can gather on. Sonia Drimmer, who's an art historian, has a really interesting essay. And if you want any of these for the show notes, let me know and I'll dig up
Cool.
links.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, so she was talking about how in the 1960s, I think, there was a lot of protest against the way computation was being used for military applications. And at that point in time, computation took place at large mainframes. So there was a physical focal point that people could
Mhm.
go to. And I think that the data centers are serving that same purpose here. And then on
Mm.
top of that, it's one of the places where the material impacts of it are really clear to people from many different walks of life, right? This is going to make electricity more expensive. It's going to make the electrical grid less reliable. It's going to, impact your water supply. And, what I've observed, and again, not my area, but this seems to be true. Also, highly recommend Karen Howe's Empire of AI for talking about this. Is that we aren't locating these data centers in places where water and electricity are cheap and abundant,
Mhm.
especially like green energy. They're going where regulation is lax.
Yeah.
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 And so it's something that impacts people very quickly, and I think that that helps it be a very effective way to resist.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I've been thinking a lot about, something that you said when you, opened up your CATS lecture at the
Mhm.
University of Washington recently. You talked about how much of the work of resisting AI starts with joyful human connection,
Yeah.
and that's so much of what we're kind of about in this podcast. I was wondering if you can talk about how this is kind of an essential cornerstone of resistance.
Yeah. This builds on an idea from Chris Gilliard, who coined the phrase technologies of isolation. And
Mm. Yeah.
the idea, right, um, is all of these platforms are about either inserting themselves between person to person connection. So LinkedIn, Facebook, all these things. Like you find your friends on Facebook, but you have to do it through, Meta's platforms to get
Mhm.
there. Or replacing human connection. So instead of going to the library, ask ChatGPT or Google it, right? At that point, instead of talking to a friend, um, talk with a chatbot. And there's been interesting work on sort of measuring how people experience what looks like empathy from machines. And I'm thinking of the work of Anat Perry here,
Mhm.
where, and also this like really cursed, not IRB approved study by someone at this company called Coco, where basically both of these groups find that if you give people extruded text that is like in the shape of a sympathetic response, an empathetic response, they will find it. They'll prefer those responses until they know it came from a machine, and then they hate
Mhm.
them because the whole
Mm.
point is being known by somebody, is connecting.
Yeah.
And sometimes this stuff is sold as like lightening the load because if you turn to a friend with a trouble, you are burdening them. You're asking for something, right? But MJ Crockett points out that actually the act of giving empathy, though it's work, right? Though it is not something that necessarily happens easily or without pain, is extremely rewarding and valuable to the person offering the empathy.
Right.
And so, because all of this is sort of set up as technologies of isolation, something we can always do to resist that is sort of immediately rewarding is to connect with other people.
And arguably good for our society in general.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I saw this really terrifying ad, maybe earlier this week. I wish I'd paid more attention to it, but it said something like, it had a woman talking to her cell phone, and it said, "Your wife didn't get the job. Now she's talking to Claude," or one of these chatbots. Yeah,
Wait, what's it an ad for?
I guess for husbands who don't wanna support their wives when they have bad news.
Yeah.
I wanna and there's been some really interesting evidence coming out about the gender gap in terms of who uses these tools.
Mm,
I wondered if you wanted to talk at all about some of the gender dynamics and dimensions of especially chatbots.
yeah. So I am not following the literature on who's using them and gender dynamics there, but it is, if we go back to this issue of like what was the training data, right? It is absolutely going to take a more male lens on the world because of who's participating on the internet. So
Hmm.
even if you're only looking at gender, um, and very hard to get past binary notions of gender and things like that, and just having conversation immediately previous to this, recording an episode of my podcast with Alex Hanna, and our guest this time was Carmen Maria Machado, which was really fun and
Oh my god,
exciting.
that's
Yeah,
amazing.
that episode will be out in a few weeks, and super excited. Um, and we were talking about so-called AI in education. And one of the things that came up was um, this terrible article from AFT featuring a few teachers who were using, in quotes, AI creatively in their classrooms. And one of them was talking about using one of these systems to extrude, my word, not his, um, uh, personalized little stories for kids to read as a reward. Right. And so we were talking about how sad it is that kids are not getting, in this case, the chance to connect with actual children's literature. And one dimension of that is how important it is for kids in varying identities to feel seen in what they're reading. And if instead of reading books that are sort of written to celebrate many different identities, you get this, in quotes, personalized thing because the teacher prompted it to tell a story about dinosaurs or something, the kids are going to miss out on that chance to sort of connect to the broader world and see their own identity lifted up in literature.
Well, not to mention their opportunity to connect with other kids who have read the same thing, right? Which is such a
Yeah,
fundamental, like, reading community experience, right? Like, it's why
absolutely.
we have book clubs. Um,
Yeah.
so, I wonder if I could end by asking you, what helps you to sustain these sorts of joyful human connections these days? This is a question we like to ask our guests on the podcast, and I
Yeah.
think it feels particularly relevant now.
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think it also, for me, connects back with this issue of like, how do we navigate institutions that seem to be so far into the hype train?
Yes.
And um, I think it really is about, finding our people and connecting with folks who have similar concerns. And then just sort of the what helps to maintain joyful human connection is to do joyful human connection and, to make time for friends and to say yes when someone asks for something, but also when I feel a need, think, well, who can I turn to, not what can I turn to?
Yeah, and keep those muscles functioning.
Yeah.
Well,
It-
Emily, it has been such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for your time and all of the expertise that you give to us. It truly feels like a gift in these bizarre times that we're in.
Bizarre is such a great word for it. And thank you for the work that you do. It's great to be on this podcast.
Oh, thanks so much.
Well, Nora, now that we have listened to you sycophantically,
Hey now.
interview Emily. I kid, I kid, man. I was literally just jealous listening to it. I was like, I so wish
We
I
are all entitled to our fangirl episodes, Marcus, and this is one of mine. So,
No, in all honesty, this is just truly an excellent conversation. As our listeners know, uh, this is, I want to say, maybe the third episode that we've devoted to big tech, specifically around AI. And the reason that we continue to do so is that it is, whether it's, whether you believe that is overhyped, underhyped, what have you, it's definitely something that continues to have, I should say, a tremendous impact upon our lives and will unfortunately continue to have a huge impact on our lives. So the more that we can know about it, the more aware we can be of it, and the less I should say sort of hysterical we can be over it and put it and right size it, if you will. Uh, and when I say right size, I mean the conversation around AI, all the better. And I think, Nora, your splendid interview with Emily did just that.
thank you. No, I think talking to Emily makes me feel like a sane person again when it comes to AI because it feels like so much of what's being thrown at us all the time is just unhinged from the reality of how we actually experience these
Yes.
things.
Yes.
And one of the things I love about Emily is that she's just so willing to say what the thing really is rather than to kind of
Mm,
like drink the Kool-Aid or even accept that the Kool-Aid exists. And I think that's a
yeah.
really powerful thing. And I think she gives us some really powerful advice here for how to resist all of that in our everyday lives, no matter how it touches us.
No, absolutely. And I think, again, going back to how, the levels of hype, like whether it comes from Sam Altman, our Claude, and how much of, quite frankly, that hype is simply just marketing, right? And has ultimately has a detachment from, as you said, the reality of our day to day and how we even interact with this technology. All right. Well, Nora, shall we get into some aspects of joy from this week?
Please, yes.
I I know we all need them.
I'll go first because mine is a little bit related to what Emily said at the end of her interview with me. We talked about the sort of joy of messy human connection and using that to
Yeah.
resist. And of course, that's so much of what this whole podcast is about.
Yes.
Um, but one of the kind of lovelier kind of joys of messy human connection that I've experienced recently was I guess a week or two ago, I attended a meeting at Yale with a bunch of disability advocates. And I think, you know, Marcus, that I've been working with very, very sick and disabled
Yeah.
folks for quite a while, mostly people who have long COVID and conditions like ME/CFS that are these like incredibly energy limiting diseases. Many people end up living from what they call bed space. Most are too sick to work. What was really cool was I got to hear this panel of artists talk about how they continue to get together and make art from their bed space.
Mm,
And this included visual artists, but also a group called the Pillow Writers, which is this really lovely group that gets together online and writes together, writes about their experiences and writes about daily life. They even built this like fictional village where they can all like write stories and hang out
oh
online.
wow.
It's just like it's such a beautiful expression of like non AI fueled human
Mm,
creativity and
yeah.
expression, and like shows how fundamental it is that these people who are so sick, who have so little energy and really like bandwidth every day, choose to spend some of that on art creation. I think speaks to like the centrality of art in our
Absolutely.
culture, and like just not just like creating it for oneself, but like creating it together in community.
Mm,
So anyways, it gave me so much to remember and to think about, and I'm just so grateful to those creators. And we'll post a link to
yeah.
their latest anthology in the show notes.
Well, shoot. I will say, with my 8 ounces, I hate to sound like a rapacious capitalist, but
It's
I,
got to be one of us,
I
Marcus.
mean, hey, somebody's got to pay the bills. No, I. So, this past week, yeah, I was fortunate enough. Many of our listeners know that I also own a book publishing company called Hinton Publishing.
Yeah.
Um, that publishes the voices of underinvited folks from the public. Sorry, it publishes folks who we say are have been historically underinvited to the publishing industry, and one of those folks uh, is a gentleman, Ed Taylor, whose book we published called "The Power of the River." He is. I don't. I think he's fine if I share his age. I'll just say he's over 60. Um, and didn't think that his story at first was worth telling, and yet had spent 20 years working on this manuscript of
Hmm.
um, all of his stories and tales, and his sort of navigating these various institutions as a black man, and still having to try to hold on to his humanity and show up every single day, while also trying to benefit his community. And so anyway,
No.
um, it was just truly a joy to have a small part in making somebody's dream come true. And the
Oh,
fact is that he still is very modest, and barely wants to tell anybody that he's that this book has come out, which isn't great when you're trying to sell the book. But I but in all seriousness, it's truly great to, as you said earlier about art, like at the end of the day, like you're never too old to, whether it's writing or drawing or painting or poetry or what have you. I don't think you're ever too old to truly access the part of you that is creative, right? As long as you um as long as you try not to bury that part of yourself. And
mm.
so I would say to anybody, like, it's however old you are, you there, don't go to your grave with beautiful music inside of you, if you will, right? It is never a wrong time to express your creativity.
That
So
should be like the tagline for your press, Marcus.
I, unfortunately, it's already trademarked, so I can't. Not that I looked into it, but
Um, no, seriously, I've had the privilege of working with Ed Taylor a little bit at the university, and he's just a one of a kind person. And I for one am super excited to read this book.
yeah. Well, yeah. You didn't even ask me for a free copy. You were like, I'm actually just gonna buy it. So
Totally
that's
gonna go buy that from a local bookstore.
independent, of course. Independent bookstore, of course. Anyhow. Well, with that, shall we bid adieu for today,
I
Nora?
I think we are as done as we're gonna be.
That's-
Folks, if you have made it this far, you've made it maybe to the dessert portion of this smorgasbord from hell. We hope you've um, added some well-deserved sugar rewards to your week.
yeah, and a huge thanks to Emily Bender, who brings the kind of honest brilliance we all need to cut through the AI hype and hold tech bros accountable. Emily dropped an extra large serving of wisdom for us this week, medicinal grade, I would call it. And if you want to look up any of the additional papers and books she mentioned, you can find them in the show notes.
Thanks as well to our head chef extraordinaire, Jessica Partnow, and to Ahamaluo for serving up our music. They both take this podcast from diner fare to Michelin stars every single week.
And don't worry, we haven't taxed this metaphor enough because after the dessert course comes the check, folks. If you enjoy what we do here, you can do several things to support the show and keep it on the air. One, share it with a friend, or several friends, or the whole neighborhood, your enemies, whomever. I don't care. Just share it with somebody. And you can also donate or subscribe to the show at inthemeanwhilepodcast.com.
Seriously, your support means everything to us. If you haven't noticed, Marcus already has like 6 different jobs. We really don't need him trying to wait tables as well. You can catch In the Meanwhile Wednesdays at 5 on KVRU or wherever you stream podcasts.
Until then, folks, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and try to spend this week in joyous, messy community with actual people rather than chatbots.
New episodes drop every Friday. We'll see you in the meanwhile.